Welcome to Prepare First Year Students for Success. I wanted to thank you for coming today. This webinar is brought to you by Human Resources. Human Resources is a worldwide provider in the development and provision of online assessments, student success, and personal development programs. We also have a free resume service that you can learn more about at humanresources.com. And we're so pleased to have Dr. Thomas E. Rojo Aubrey here today to share how we can help first-year students. Dr. Aubrey is the Director of Behavioral Health Sciences, Faculty Chair for Counseling and Behavioral Science Division, and Professor and First-Year Coordinator at South Mountain Community College in Arizona. Dr. Aubrey has his doctorate in behavioral health and is working on a second doctorate in cognitive psychology. Dr. Aubrey also serves on the Psychology Counseling Advisory Board for Grand Canyon University and the Advisory Board for the Arizona Trauma Institute, as well as the Governing Board for the National Institute for Behavioral Medicine. He's the author of several textbooks, including The Science of College Success, The Resilient Professional, and The Science of Trauma and Recovery. Today's webinar is based on the content within the Science of College Success, which covers the topics, if you want to go one more slide, Thomas, yeah, that's great, which covers the topics that you see on the screen today. And I'd like to welcome Thomas to today's call, but before I pass things over to him, I just wanted to run a quick poll and see what role people have within their organization. I'll just quickly launch that. And if you feel comfortable doing so, please type it into the chat. It just lets us know so that we can appropriately kind of target or orient our webinars and content. So it looks like right now we're kind of pretty even split between counselors, instructors, administrators, and other. And I know other can cover a wide variety of roles. Thank you so much for taking the time to do that poll. That is helpful to us. And great, I'll pass things over to Dr. Aubrey.
Thank you, Tamara. So, given that we have a good, just an even amount of counselors versus advisors versus instructors, I think each of you will benefit from this presentation. The counselors, some of the verbiage up here, you're like, oh, I can relate. I know what CBT is. So as I go through the presentation, if there's any kind of lingo that I use, and I'm just not quite sure what that means, don't hesitate to, in the chat room, just type it in, question mark, hey, what is that? And by all means, I'll be glad to elaborate. And Tamara can keep track of the of that because I don't have I can't, if I try to keep track of what's going on in the chat, I won't be able to see the PowerPoint. So, but if we take a look at the agenda today, we're going to take a look and we're going to just briefly just touch and not even really dive deep into stress that students are experiencing. Because the honest truth is that you're the experts in that area. You know what your students are experiencing. I can talk about what's going on at the national level, but I have no clue what's going on at your institution. But we're going to talk because whatever the case is, whatever forms of stress, it's all registered in the brain in a similar way. So we'll take a look at the physiology, what's happening in the brain when your students are stressed, and how does that impact their learning? Because that's really important for these instructors. A lot of times we see students distracted within the classroom, and then we don't realize there's an enormous amount of stress that our students are bringing in before even entering that door. And if we don't address those, that pink elephant in the room, then it will impact their ability to perform within my classroom or their ability to even learn the material that I'm teaching. We're going to take a look then, dive deeper into what is the root cause of stress. And then we're going to take a look, now that we understand the cause of stress, let's take a look at what is a mindfulness-based CBT exercise that you can do, whether you're an instructor, you can do this in the classroom, whether you're a counselor, you might perform this on a one-on-one basis an appointment with the student that you're seeing. And then we're going to move quickly into the academic resilience pedagogy. So, what is it that we package together to help you support building your students' resiliency, whether it's in the classroom setting, primarily in the classroom setting, but it can be adapted to other areas. And then we'll give you a few resources for students' well-being and resilience. So, I like to start my presentations with a riddle. You may have heard this, but if not, we're not gonna get into the answer to the riddle till later on, but something to ponder on as we go through the presentation. So I'd like you to take a second. You're welcome to close your eyes, but do it in a relaxed state because I'm going to ask you to imagine. Just imagine you're rowing a boat and it's sinking. Now, as you look as far as you can see, there's no land in sight. And you're surrounded by hungry sharks. What do you do? Take a quick second. What do you do? I get multiple answers to this question when I do this presentation in person. If I was chewing gum, I'd start plugging the holes on the boat with my gum, or I'd find some other means to plug those holes. I'd grab the row and I start beating the shark. Uh, what would you do? And we're going to take a look at what the answer to this riddle is later on. But let's take a look at, because the fact is, if you were in that situation, that would not be just petrifying, it would be stressful, extremely stressful. And that's what our students are experiencing. They're experiencing a large amount of stress, as if they were in a boat surrounded by hungry sharks. And so when we take a look at least at the statistical national level, when we look at stress, some of the surveys show that 65% report feeling stressed all of the time or very often. So 65% of the students at a national level are reporting high levels of stress. 37% of students report moderate to severe levels of stress. Now that's a lot. um, speaking, because if you think about it, and we'll take a look at how is that stress impacting their learning. That's probably very close to a representation of how many students successfully proceed and complete in the community college, right? About 40 to 45, depending on the research, 45% of students actually complete. Well, there's to some degree some parallel here. We have this amount of almost very similar amount of students that are experiencing stress. And maybe if we look at the 65%, maybe a percentage of those have some abilities to overcome some of the stressors that they're experiencing in their life, at work, etc., relationships, other areas of life. But then we have a large percentage that are just not able to overcome the challenges because they don't have the skills, or they weren't taught those skills to overcome the challenges, and it may be impacting their ability to persist and complete. And we could go on for, probably about an hour talking about what types of stressors your students are experiencing, whether it's related to work, whether it's related to relationships, or even other areas of your life. Maybe some students, and I've had this situation, say you're the cause of their stress because you're giving them too much homework assignments. So whatever the case, that's their perception and that's their reality. And we really have to listen and validate where they're at. And so let's take a look at the fact that they're going through this stress, whether we believe it's real or not. That is their reality, that is their perception. It's still having an impact on their physiology, which is impacting their ability to learn. So let's take a look at how that impacts their ability to learn. And one of the examples that I give in the classroom, and I give in many of my workshops, such as this one, is the tiger in the classroom. So I tell students, and I tell those I'm presenting to, instructors, just imagine for a second if you're in a classroom, maybe I'm teaching chemistry, and I bring a tiger into the classroom, and I allow that tiger to wander around the classroom, roaring as I'm teaching you the elements of the periodic table. And I ask students, and I ask you as professionals the same, because even professionals, if I were to ask, name the first 10 elements of the periodic table, unless you're a chemistry instructor, you won't be able to. It was like, well, I learned that back in high school. I don't remember. So if I were to teach you the 10 elements of the periodic table as that tiger is roaming the classroom, how many of you would actually learn the 10 elements of the periodic table to the point where that after class, a pop quiz, you would successfully pass that pop quiz? And my guess is that most of us would agree that that would be very difficult to do. Now, occasionally I have a student, and I had one student once that said, I can do it. And my response to that student is, uh, your survival skills, my friend, sucks. But the reality is that it doesn't, because we're built for survival. Our brains are built for survival. Our physiology is built for survival. So what would happen is, as I explained to the classroom, is that if you had eaten a steak prior to coming into my classroom, and that tiger is in the room as I'm teaching the elements of the periodic table, what will happen is that blood that normally is needed in the digestive system in the stomach area to digest that steak will then divert from the digestive system, from the stomach, go to the some of the extremities like your legs to provide glucose to run away from the tiger, or maybe to your arms for glucose to fight the tiger. It's the system starts to slow down, starts to go offline. So at that moment, that's more important. Is if you started to digest, and while that's an important part of survival in life, you need nutrition, your cells need to be nourished. Well, but if you continue doing that and didn't care about survival, you would be eaten by the tiger. So you wouldn't have time to maybe eat the next steak. But your body is so intelligent that it understands that. Your brain does the same thing. So activity that is in the cortical regions of the brain that we need, for example, in the classroom, such as mathematics, is critical thinking. Maybe in a college success course, in that regional cortical area that we need for reflection. That activity in that area starts to divert to the subcortical regions of the brain, the limbic system, right? And even the survival, the brainstem part of the system for survival. So now we don't have access to the or 100% access because it starts to go offline for abstract and reflective thinking and critical thinking, and even memory becomes impaired. So when we take a look at our students from that lens, from that perspective, students are distracted in class. Students are just not getting it. Instructions are just, the dots are not connecting. Critical thinking seems to be off. Abstract and reflective thinking. You ask students, how many of you have a growth mindset after explaining to them? And everybody raises their hand. And of course, in your mind, as you know some of these students, and they obviously struggle with growth mindset. Well, because that part of the brain, the reflective thinking, is not online. And yet we start to force teachings. We're teaching time management skills, growth and fixed mindset, when that part of the brain is not working or it's starting to come offline, right? It would be very similar to software. We're trying to force software into an old computer that doesn't have the hardware to read the software. And so from that lens, we have to take a step back as a counselor, as an instructor, or even as an advisor, that while this is really good information, their brains are not able to read that information at this point. So how do I remove that tiger in the classroom so that that part of the brain, the neocortical part of the brain starts becoming active again, starts to come back online. so that they can be flourishing within your classroom, so that even in the counseling session, they have reflective thinking and they're able to really reflect on what you're saying and come up with solutions and then apply those as solutions into their life, things that they don't have when that tiger's in the classroom. Now, obviously, when I do this training with instructors, I tell them that would be ludicrous to think that you would even bring a tiger into the classroom. But that tiger is figurative. And those are all the stressors that we thought about earlier. What are some of the stressors that your students are experiencing? And maybe the argument with their girlfriend, with their boyfriend, right before class. Uh, the you know, thoughts of I may lose my job coming to this class, and I might not have money to pay put to put food on the table, and you want me to learn the 10 elements of the periodic table. It just doesn't make sense from a survival perspective. It may be the traumas that they have experienced in the past, or even some of those painful past experiences that they've encountered in their life, and they bring that all into your classroom. And unless we look at things from a different perspective and how we should teach, because many times we come to, well, that's not my job, right? To help students alleviate that tiger, right? That's a counselor's position. But unless we change our perspective on how we teach in the classroom, it doesn't matter how well the amazing pedagogy that we have, amazing instruction, we may have the most beautiful PowerPoint. Students are not going to be able to learn the material. So we have to start with the foundation that the first thing is students come into our classroom and understanding, and that's a trauma-informed perspective. Students come into our classroom with stressed brains. And unless I help create safety within the classroom, they're going to struggle to learn. And that really is our jobs and our duty, whether you're an advisor, whether you're an instructor, or whether you're a counselor. We all pitch in to help our students succeed. And we have to start at that foundation. And so let's take a look at what is the cause of stress. And this may be a slight shift in our perception on how we have viewed stress for many years. But unless we have this shift, it's going to be very challenging for us to eliminate some of the causes that stress um, that arise because of stress in our lives. So this is and I would take some notes because this is an experimental exercise that I actually do in the class. I encourage you that you do it in the class. You can actually tailor it for a counseling appointment, tailor it even for an academic advisement session when you see that a student's coming in very stressed out. And so you may have, for example, a clipboard or your chalkboard up, and you may have students come up and talk about or raise their hand or just have a discussion if you're having a one-on-one session in an appointment with students. Is your life stressful? Simple question. And I say that to this audience. Is your life stressful? Is school stressful? Some of you, even though you may be advisors, you're going for your doctorate, possibly, or some of the counselors are maybe going for their doctorate. So is school stressful? Is work stressful? What about relationships? Are those stressful? And it's not just the relationships at home, but even the relationships with possibly your supervisor. Are those stressful? How about other areas of life? And what I do with students is on the board, it can be a clipboard, it can be chalkboard, I'll have cause and effects. And I'll have students come up and line up, and I'll have first we'll start with the causes, and then we'll go to effects. So what I'll ask students is write a list of the things that cause your stress under the section that says causes. So think of that. Go ahead and type in, put yourself in your student's shoes. What are some of the causes of the stress that's occurring in your student's life? And just go ahead and type those out. Tamara will just go ahead and read those. And if you just can't put yourself in your student's shoes, then maybe if you want to disclose a little bit, what are some of the stressors in your life? I mean, you may say, well, the chair of my department is a stressor, and I can say that because I'm the chair, but maybe they're the stressors.
Yeah, we've got a few answers here. We've got money, balancing school and employment, issues at home, competitive, toxic academic culture, issues, responsibilities at home, health issues, transportation, food and housing insecurity, family pressures.
That's a lot of tigers they're bringing into the classrooms, right? That's a lot. So it's just looking at that list, I think we can be collectively here more compassionate with our students and understand it's good reason. They have good reason that they're struggling to learn in my classroom. Good reason that they're distracted, right? It's not that they're just not motivated. They're just lugging around this tiger around, and no one's taken the time to teach them how to not allow that tiger to just latch onto them like a hijacker into the classroom. So after they've done that list, I go on to the next level of the effects. The fact that you have these stressors in your life, these causes of stress in your life. How are those stressors impacting your life? So, what are they causing in your life? It may be difficulty sleeping. So, go ahead and take another minute or two and think about how are those stressors, the causes of your stress, the fact that you have them in your life, how are they seeping out in your life? What is it that they're affecting in your life? Is it your relationships, difficulty sleeping? Maybe it may be somatic disorders as well.
Yeah, we have fuzzy brain, lack of concentration and focus, poor grades, avoidance, focus. Absolutely.
Uh, I love that. And I love the poor grades, lack of concentration, because now we're getting to the meat and potatoes of why our students are struggling in school. And yet, for many years, traditionally, we haven't addressed this problem with our students. Yet we're saying today it's one of the core reasons. I'm not saying it's the only reason, but it's one of the core reasons our students are struggling to persist and complete in the academic world. So then after they've done that, I'll show a list, and this is a list of some of the prior workshops and is, collectively put it together. What students have mentioned, as well as professionals. It says causes multiple demands. Some of us can relate to that. Time constraints, workload. I've had students say too much homework. Specifically talking about my class, too much homework, financial problems, negativity in the family, incompetence of others, pain and suffering. And as a result of having those stressors in their life, how is it impacting their life? Well, irritability, anger, sleeping problems, fatigue, relational problems, bad attitude, you can see there, compulsive behaviors, somatic issues such as headaches. I heard earlier fogginess in the brain. So even substance abuse. And take a look at the research. There's a high amount of college students. I'm not saying that it's all due to stress, but they're abusing substances. And so those are the effects that we hear students saying that's occurring in their lives. And you brought up some additional ones that they may not have noticed: poor grades, distraction in class, and you can connect the dots. Oh, unfortunately, because my dear student is lugging that tiger around in the classroom, that figurative tiger, right? Because it's not the tiger. Well, you may be part of the tiger, right? Too much homework. But I want to challenge this perception. And I'm gonna repeat these words at least two times, if not three. The things that we listed as the causes, those are not the causes of your stress. I'll repeat that again. What we listed up here as the causes of your stress, those are not the causes of your stress. Now that's hard to take in, right? Because What do you mean that's not the causes of my stress? Those are not the causes of my stress. What are? And we'll get to that in a bit. But the concern is that as long as we continue believing that those are the causes of our stress, we're going to continue having these effects, right? Things haven't changed up to now. We had the same perception as yesterday. These are the causes of my stress. And we've had the same outcomes, the effects, and how it's impacting our life. And so something has to change, right? We can't expect, right, to do the same thing over and over and expect different results. So our hope is, my hope right now is to convince you to change, give a different perception, a different change of look of how we view these stressors so that we can have a different outcome. And so that puts me in a position where now I have to convince you here as well as in your heart. And for that, we developed a gamut of exercises that we use, experiential exercises that you can put into application. You can use this in your own life, and you can do this within the classroom for your students so they can realize, right, what is the true underlying cause of stress? And do I have an internal locus of control? Do I have control over how I can change this? And so for that, this is one of many exercises that we have. What we do is, as you can see up on the board, we put some potentially, you look at this stuff and it, and depending on what you've experienced in your life, you would say, well, these are things I don't want in my life. But the question really, as I show this screen to students or to professionals, the question that I ask and I ask you now is, are you 100% safe right now? Are you 100% safe right now? What are your thoughts? Go ahead and throw that in the chat. And put yourself in your students' shoes. What do you think your students will say? Are you 100% safe right now? And I've done this thousands of times, and I'll tell you what my across the board, what my students say.
We have an absolutely not.
Yeah. And that's in all my years of experience in teaching, and I've taught since 2010. For the most part, rarely do I have a student that says, yes, I am 100% safe right now. And I had one student that said that, and that's because a student took a class of mine. But for the most part was, no, absolutely not. I'm not 100% safe now. So what I then move on to is I tell students, I want you to go ahead, and this is the only time I'm going to tell you to do this, to lose your mind and come to your senses. This comes from the words of Fritz Perls. And for those of you that are counselors, I know that, Gestalt therapy. But lose your mind and come to your senses. And I'm twisting these words because I'm taking it from a mindfulness perspective. I want you to stop thinking and focus on your senses in the here and the now, in the present, not thinking about the future or the past. And as you do this, what I'd like you to do is take 10 seconds and mindfully experience the room where you're currently at without any judgment and cut off from any past learning or future risk and just observe the objects within your room and identify anything that's dangerous right now. And you're welcome to go ahead and throw in the chat. I mean, when I did this on virtually, I had one student said scissors. And my question was, how are those scissors dangerous? I could potentially take those scissors and stab myself. And my response to that is that could be a potential thought that's happening. But the question is, are you grabbing those scissors right now? No. Are you stabbing yourself right now? No. Good, I don't have to call 911. So those scissors are not dangerous. We can all experience dangerous thoughts. I would be a liar to say if I didn't never crossed my mind to punch a supervisor that I've had in the past. But did I act upon it? And I take it next. I mean, I had those thoughts, yes. But am I acting? So are those thoughts 100% safe right now? Yes. I had a student who said, well, this projector, this was in person, the projector is dangerous. It could fall on me. And so I walked around, stood under the projector, and my question was, is that projector falling right now? No. So that projector right now is 100% safe in the present moment. Because I did ask, are you 100% safe right now? I didn't ask, are you 100% safe 5 minutes from now? Or are you 100% safe based on your past? Right now, in the present moment. I'm talking about being mindful in the present moment, in the here and now. It's not easy, but if we can focus in the present moment, the here and now, 99%, maybe even 99.99% of the time, we are 100% safe right now. And if you're not, then you should be dialing 911. Well, my guess is nobody in this room at this moment, and I hope not, is dialing 911 because they are in danger right now. There are possibilities, absolutely 100%, but is it happening right now? So the thing is, when we take a look at this experiential exercise, we see that we see things not as they truly are, but as we are. We observe objects based on our past. We predict on those objects, the things that potentially could happen, right? I had one student that said that the flag is dangerous. And I asked, help me understand, how is the flag dangerous, right? That's the Socratic debating that you're doing with your students. Well, someone could grab that flag, lunge at me, and stab me through the heart with that. And I'm thinking, what are my students watching on YouTube? But the question is, yes, well, that might be it might be given the situation and in the climate you're at, it statistically it may not, it may be low, but could it possibly happen? Yes. But the question is it happening right now? No. Then that flag is 100% safe right now. I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but what I do know, and I've trained police officers in the same way, what I do know is that your body is built for survival. In the moment that dangerous situation occurs, you can trust your nervous system. It will activate. For police officers, you can trust your training to protect yourself. But if you're on guard 24/7, and we see that, we see police officers and research that they measure the levels of cortisol way after when they get back to the precinct and even after they're heading back home and they're extremely high levels of cortisol. How is that going to impact their life? They're having high levels of cortisol, high levels of adrenaline. They're going home. Now their kids are coming to them. Daddy, daddy, daddy. Can they engage with their children, with their spouse? Have these deep moments of conversation when they're losing access to that higher part of the brain that allows them to relationally connect with their loved ones. It becomes very challenging because the brain's not built to do that, right? If you're in a state of survival, you start losing access to that part of the brain. And so the research shows it. Higher rates of divorce, higher rates of substance abuse, that we are found not just in first responder professions, but many other types of professions that are exposed to high levels of secondary and primary traumatic stress. So our students in the very similar fashion, they're being exposed. In my case, at South Mountain, many of my students live in areas that are gang related. So there's a lot of stress that they're being exposed to in their neighborhood, and they're coming to school. And as a result, they're perceiving everything within my classroom as they are. Now, it truly is because while out there in their neighborhood, by all means, on the street, there might be a lot of danger. But in this classroom, in this moment, right now, you're 100% safe. But how do I help them achieve that? I can't unless I start teaching them the ability to be present in the moment. So let's go back to the riddle. Given, and I think some of you can connect the dots. What's the solution? What do you do? Anybody want to type it in? Now I will give the answer to the riddle. It's simple. Stop imagining. I did tell you to imagine, right? Stop imagining. If your cortisol levels are coming up, stop imagining. Because right now, you're not in a boat. Right now, in this present moment, you're not surrounded by hungry sharks. So if your physiology is being aroused, take a deep breath and just stop imagining. Come to the present moment and realize right now I have nothing to fear, nothing to worry about. Right? So that's the same thing too, even as professionals. Think of this from a mindfulness perspective when you're doing let's give an example. Let's say you come to your email and your inbox is just loaded. You've just gotten inundated with 300 emails. Take a look at the verbiage here, the feelings of stress related to being busy. Too many tasks, too little time, 300 emails, too big the task, and maybe too little time. I have a class that starts in 15 minutes. I have 300 emails to respond. Some of those are urgent. Is the result of thinking about what you're not doing in the moment. So what does that mean? Take it from a practical perspective. In the moment, I'm responding to one email. If I can focus, and it's easier said than done, but if I can train my brain, the more I keep on redirecting my brain to the present moment, that's the neuroplasticity, the more it becomes easier for me to focus on what I'm doing in the present moment. If I'm doing an email and at the same time I'm writing that email, I'm thinking about the other 299 emails that I have to write. On top of that, I'm thinking about what do I have to make for dinner after work, and then thinking about all the other activities that I have to do and stressors and due dates, then I'm going to stress myself out because I wasn't in the present moment focusing on what I'm doing then here and now. Single-minded focus on one single task. If I can learn to focus on one thing and let things go, because the fact is we can only do so much. I'm going to finish this email, write up the email, then work on the next email, and so forth. I can reduce the levels of stress in my life by a simple act of mindfulness, being present in the moment in a non-judgmental way. Easier said than done, once again, but the more we practice it and the more we have our students practice it, the easier it becomes. Their brains will start to rewire, and then it would become easier for them to do that, even within your classroom setting. So let's take this and say, well, that's great that you're giving me these skills and it makes sense, but does it really work in the real world? Does it actually have an impact on physiology? Does it actually have an impact on the outcome in the real world instead of just a esoteric aspect of my mindset? And let's put that into perspective and you be the judge. Let's say you have two students that are taking an FYE course. And for the sake of argument, we're going to say that one FYE course is this FYE course that they're taking is a 1 credit course. But you are a teacher that an instructor that really wants to help your students. So you load that class with lots of work, lots of homework assignments, lots of reading assignments. I know you wouldn't do that, but let's say for the sake of argument, this is what you're doing in this classroom. You have two students who come into the classroom. They look at the class, one credit. One, more than likely, at least in my experience, students take a one credit course because they feel it's easy. They come into your classroom and they see it's not easy. Lots of work, lots of reading assignments, um, lots of homework assignments. We look at one student's a naysayer. They look at this and they complain for the entire 16 semesters or 8 semesters, however long the course is. And they say, this is ridiculous. I took this class. It was supposed to be an easy one credit course. There's lots of oodles of homework assignments. I have a life. I don't know, understand. The instructor doesn't have a social life. That's why she's giving me so much work. It's ridiculous. I have to work. What's going on? What is it? Through the entire duration of the semester, that's what that student becomes as a naysayer. Take a look at the cortisol levels. If we were to take blood from, we wouldn't do that obviously, but if we were to withdraw blood from our students and measure the cortisol levels, what do you think the levels of cortisol levels would be for the student, high or low? Obviously, they would be high. Now, the ratio of positive to negative emotions, and we know we're not saying negative emotions are bad. Negative emotions are important in life. But we know through the work of Dr. Martin Seligman in positive psychology that we have to have a higher level of positive ratio of positive emotions versus negative emotions. If not, what happens? It impacts our well-being, our health, right? Higher levels of cortisol will occur. Right? So if we were to measure and do a survey with that student, what do you think they're going to have? Higher levels of positive emotions or negative emotions? Obviously, the response is they're going to have higher levels of negative emotions. Now let's take a look at college success. What's the likelihood of dropout for the student to persist and complete, given the fact they have higher levels of negative emotions and higher levels of cortisol through the class? That increases, not saying that the student will, because they may just persist and push their way through class, but it increases the likelihood of dropout, of giving up. It increases the likelihood of burnout. Now let's take a different student. Now this student has a different perspective. They flip the script and they take a look at this class and they say, wow, I only have to pay one credit course. That's less money. It's not a 3 credit. And I'm getting the amount of benefit of a 3 credit course. That's like going to Chipotle, paying for one bowl and getting 3 bowls. Now, that's the perception they have throughout the duration of the semester. Now, if we were to measure the cortisol levels, what do you think that student would be? Significantly lower than the first student. The ratio of positive to negative emotions. Obviously, we would have an increased ratio of positive emotions versus negative emotions, at least compared to the first student. And course completion, would you agree that this student's more likely to persist and complete your course? Absolutely. Now, we didn't change the class. We didn't have to reduce the amount of homework. We just changed the perception of the student, and the outcome changed. And we're talking about even our physiology changed. Cortisol levels changed. Our psychology changed. Positive versus negative emotions. And the physical reality of the world, the outcome of whether you're successful or not successful increased. So there was a change in that as well. All because we helped our students see things from a different perspective. Now, granted, that's easier said than done. But the question is, have we been doing that? Have we helped our students see things from a different perspective, such as being present mindful in the moment in a non-judgmental way? Or have we allowed our students just to lug those tigers around into our classroom and into the next classroom? and just hope and pray they're going to be successful? That's a question each of us have to ponder on. How are we making a change in our students' lives? And really quick before I go into the academic resilience package that we have built for you to help you support you in this goal is going back to this illustration. Another question. This is a CBT question that I ask students. CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy. You're not doing therapy by all means, but the premise behind CBT is really changing our thinking perception of things. And so that anybody can do. You do it all the time with your students, and you don't have to have a master's degree. Now, the official role of CBT and going through the process of processing, yes, maybe you need to be a counselor, but anybody, you do it with your children helping them see things from a different perspective. We can do it with our students. You don't have to have a master's degree to do that in counseling or in any other related field. We all do that. So going back to a question that I ask in class is I'll ask the students, let's just imagine for a second, and remember, I'm saying, and I tell my class, I've said imagine. So if you're getting riled up, you're getting your physiology is getting aroused because of this question, then come back to the present moment and realize I'm asking you to imagine it's not real. We're not there yet. And so come back to the present moment. So I ask my students, imagine for a second, it's the end of the semester, class is just finished, and you go to your student center and you look for your grade and you see in this class an F. Maybe you see in an F another class. And to put it into perspective, I'll give it perspective for workers in a bit. But the question that I ask is on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the worst thing that could happen to you, how devastating is this situation? And I go around and you can imagine my students say 5, 5, 5, 5. Now, to put it into perspective, because everybody here are educated professionals. And so you may look at a grade and say, well, that's not the end of the world. But you go into your boss's office, the chair's office says, I'm sorry, things have changed, and unfortunately, we're going to have to let you go. On a scale 1 to 5, how devastating is that? So that puts it more into perspective of what students are experiencing when I ask that question. The next question I ask my students, God forbid, and if it has happened, please come see me after class. We'll get you connected with a counselor because we want to support you and we care about your well-being. But a loved one just passed away. On a scale of 1 to 5, how devastating is that? And I go around 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. And here's what I say, and this is that perceptual change. Here's what I'm hearing you say, that my class is just as important as a loved one. Can you bring back a loved one? No, right? Can you retake my class? And now always get, a student that's on top of it and very sharp. And she's like, yeah, Dr. Aubrey, but you didn't tell me the second question. If you would have told me what the second question would have been, I would have answered the first question differently. And my response is, you are 100% right, but does life tell you what's going to happen next? That's your responsibility, right? To evaluate things. But you can't do that if you lose access to that higher part of the brain because we go to the limbic system and when bad things happen, we evaluate it as this is the worst thing in my life. And there you are flatting my tires because I gave you an F, right? Well, I'm not saying you should rejoice and party for an F. It's not a 5. But it's a learning opportunity where you can say, what could I do different next time if I retake Dr. Aubrey's class or another professor's class to get an A next time, right? But we're not there because we lost access to that part of that reflective part of the brain, right? That's the growth and fixed mindset. But you can't have growth and fixed mindset if you don't first learn how to access that part of the higher part of the brain, the upstairs brain. And so Something to think about. Now, we have intentionally built a curriculum, and I'm just going to quickly go through this because I want at least 5 minutes for some questions. But we've intentionally built the curriculum to help you do that because it's not easy. And you can see this, we call it the pillars of resiliency. We teach inner balance by teaching self-regulation. How do you first help yourself regulate yourself with it may be breathing exercises, and we all know this. And but properly done breathing exercises, and I'm saying that because I get a lot of students, and I even when I was working in the clinical world, get a lot of patients that come to me and they said, "Oh, a social worker or this counselor taught me how to do breathing exercises. It didn't work." And so I said, "Well, walk me through the exercise." And they walked me through it, and I noticed they were not taught correctly how to do breathing exercises. I don't have time to go through that, but there is a proper way. When you exhale, it has a different action in the nervous system. When you inhale, it activates the nervous system. When you exhale, it relaxes the nervous system. So with that, you have to do it properly because if we do it, boxers do a lot of more inhaling. They're exciting. They, if we want to relax, we're not going to do some boxer type of breathing. That's good for the ring because I don't want to be overly relaxed where I'm too relaxed inside the gym where now I can just barely throw punches because I'm so tired and exhausted, right? So there's different techniques, and we go through that curriculum and how you teach your students those different techniques to help them relax, activate the parasympathetic nervous system versus the parasympathetic nervous system versus the sympathetic nervous system. But then once we learn that, we then go into mental flexibility. Because if we don't learn the first aspect of how to regulate the body, we can't regulate ourselves mentally. That's the growth and fixed mindset. But if we can't do that, it's going against the grain if we don't teach first the self-regulation skills. So, and that includes, like I said, that mental flexibility. What we did today was mental flexibility, telling yourself, am I 100% safe right now? Most of us are regulated and we got it. But you tell somebody with generalized anxiety disorder, you're 100% safe right now. There's nothing to worry about. They're not going to feel it. You're trying to teach them mental flexibility when they haven't learned self-regulation, how to relax their body yet. It doesn't work. It was one of the blunders in psychotherapy in the 80s. We were trying to do that CBT component, trying to change their thinking without helping them relax their body. And it just didn't work. We didn't see behavioral changes occur. And now CBT caught on, and that's why with most of the CBT therapies, they start with self-regulation before they get into changing cognition, mental flexibility. Then we get into purpose and meaning, developing that purpose and meaning within the classroom setting. How do students learn to each and every assignment has a purpose and has a meaning? How do I find that purpose and meaning? Because if you don't, you can easily get burned out or you just don't do the things. I mean, in my classroom setting, when I teach FYE courses or college success courses, one of the first questions I ask is, why are you here? And it's interesting because students say, well, because my advisor forced me to come, because I have to take this credit. If I don't change that purpose and meaning, it's going to be hard for my students to persist and complete and really want to learn in my classroom. So we get to the point of how do we help students change their purpose and meaning of why they're here in school, why they're doing each and every assignment. All the way up to the work of Dr. Martin Seligman, which is in the next pillar, the positive psychological strengths. That's the positive psychology. I don't want my students just to survive. I want them to thrive. I want them to be healthy. So how do I use the elements of positive psychology to build happiness for my students? And then we move into meaningful and purposeful relationships. How do I help my students give them the skills to connect with their professors? If I do have disagreements, how do I say that in a way that I don't activate my professor's nervous system, right? I don't tell my professor, well, my math instructor teaches better than you do. Well, that's going to naturally activate the sympathetic nervous system of of the instructor, right? We would think we're bigger than that, but we may have a snarky remark. Well, yeah, I get it. You have to have a higher intellect in this class. What are we telling that student? Right? So teaching the student, how do I transmit what my needs are to my instructor where I don't activate their nervous system and I connect to them in a meaningful and purposeful way. And so we're looking at the research of all the skills of effective communication that actually does that. And then the last one, and that's usually when you go through a resiliency course, that's the only element that they usually teach. Self-care and revitalization. It's that eating healthy, exercise, and good sleep. And that's the last because if you don't do all the other elements, you're not going to be able to do self-care and put it into your own life's perspective. If you have a stressful day at work, do you go home saying, "Oh, I can't wait to dig into that salad. I can't wait to go to the gym," if you have a stressful day at work? So you have to first practice the other elements while at work so that at the end of the day, you're not expending all your energy of the nervous system where you have no more energy to give back to your self-care and revitalization process. So I know I was going to give 5 minutes, so I apologize. So I'm just going to quickly go for the uniqueness of this curriculum. We do have assessments, contrary, and we do use evidence-based assessments to measure, does this work? We've seen some amazing results using this curriculum with our students. And in addition to that, what we've embedded and I'm talking more about, we have other curriculum, other books that we mentioned earlier that I've written, and those have micro certifications and badges embedded into that. But so does our FYE, because our FYE is also preparing them for the career. And we want to embed that micro certification where they can leave, in this case, with essential employable skills, micro certification, put that on the resume and help them really sell themselves when they go out in the market and apply for work. So that's one of the uniqueness that you can't find in any other FYE curriculum, to my knowledge. Please, as I've looked and seen all the textbooks out there, and I haven't seen anything in that nature, and that's why I wanted to embed that in there. So let me go into some free resources. Go ahead and take a screenshot. I did create a free mindfulness course that your students, your staff, and faculty are welcome to use. But it really doesn't go through the entire pedagogy that I had mentioned earlier. So if you want access to that resource, go ahead and take a screenshot. Please reach out to Carla. There's her email. She will be glad to give you access to that to review that if you want to look at adoption for your textbook, or you can always welcome to reach out to me if you have any questions. Thank you for your time.
So thank you everybody for your time today. We certainly know it's valuable and we appreciate it. And thanks again, Dr. Aubrey, for sharing your knowledge with us. We really appreciate it.